This is Kendall, my walking bank account. The sentence sliced through the hum of clinking glasses and dinner conversation like a fire alarm in a quiet hallway. My mother delivered it with that bright, rehearsed smile, the kind she wore whenever she was about to empty my wallet, but wanted to make it seem charming. The smile never touched her eyes. It never did. Laughter rippled around the table, polite, knowing, complicit. The kind of laughter people use when cruelty is dressed as humor, and they'd rather join in than stand out. I could feel their attention settle on me, warm and expectant, as though I should grin and take a bow. For a heartbeat, the pattern of the white tablecloth twisted under my fingertips, blurring like I had suddenly forgotten how to breathe. Then the air changed. Across from me, my cousin Anya met her husband's eyes, and her jaw tightened. When she spoke, her tone wasn't loud, but it carried steady and unmistakably firm. "Enough, Auntie." That single word punched through the fading laughter like a trumpet blast across still water. The whole table froze. My mother choked in mid-sip. Chardonnay sprayed from her mouth, splattering across the spotless linen. She coughed and sputtered, going pale as she processed the horror of being called out publicly, in front of every relative who had always been her audience. Anya didn't waver. Her voice remained calm, sharp enough to cut glass. "I think you meant to say this is your daughter, the one who works 60 hours a week to take care of her own children." The words dropped like a sledgehammer onto marble. The laughter vanished instantly. A couple at a nearby table actually turned to stare. My sister Chloe shot daggers at Anya from across the table. My father, who had been chuckling along just seconds before, suddenly became deeply fascinated with the serrated edge of his steak knife, as though the metal might hold the secrets of the universe. And in that thick, breathless silence, for the first time in all 36 years of my life, I felt something shift. I wasn't the one exposed anymore. She was. I had walked into this dinner bracing for battle. Family birthdays were supposed to be celebrations, but for me, they were battlegrounds disguised as parties. My father was turning 65, and my mother insisted on hosting the celebration at a lavish Chicago steakhouse, crystal chandeliers dripping like frozen rain, tuxedoed waiters gliding between tables with silver trays. It was a stage, and she always chose the cast. I carefully picked my outfit, a simple black dress, understated, accompanied only by my grandmother's silver locket. I'd learned long ago that blending in was safer than drawing attention, especially beside my mother. At 63, she had only grown sharper, more entitled, more theatrical in her demands. She lived for the spotlight, even if she had to shove someone else into the darkness to bask in it. Ever since my first real paycheck, she'd gifted me a nickname, my little ATM. My safety net, my backup plan, my sure thing. I learned early that the safest way to exist in this family was to stay quiet, dependable and giving. My siblings, louder and flashier, won her praise. I held up the roof without being seen. And pressure. Pressure teaches you exactly where the cracks are. Years of financial manipulation had built a core of iron in me. Iron I never used. I paid for Chloe's influencer business course when she declared she was destined for fame. I covered my parents' roof replacement when theirs started leaking. I co-signed a loan for my brother after he totaled his car. No one asked twice. I said yes, before the word no even formed in my throat. I thought if I couldn't earn their pride, I could at least avoid their disappointment. So I kept attending dinners, kept paying, kept absorbing the blows, quietly missed vacations, skipped overtime meals, exhaustion buried beneath politeness. To them, I was just Kendall, the responsible one, the daughter with money, the inexhaustible resource. And then tonight happened. My mother launched into a monologue about a once-in-a-lifetime cruise. She and my father had discovered non-refundable deposits. Last-minute discounts, urgency. I already knew where it was going. But nothing prepared me for her pivot toward the table, toward aunts, uncles, cousins, and the triumphant announcement. This is Kendall. My walking bank account. Some laughed because they found it funny. Some laughed because silence was scarier. And that was the cruelest part. I stood there, heat rising under my skin, pulse hammering. Part of me wanted to disappear. Another part wanted to flip the table. I didn't have to do either. Anya did it for me. My mother stammered, trying to mop the spilled wine, her voice tinged with disbelief that anyone had dared to challenge her. Anya didn't blink. It's Dad's birthday. We're here to celebrate him, not to publicly shake Kendall down for $3,200 for a cruise deposit. Silence thickened, suffocating. Chloe broke first. Oh my God, Anya, it was obviously a joke. Lighten up. Anya's reply was aimed straight at me. Was it? Because it didn't sound like a joke. It sounded like a demand. My mother's expression hardened, entitlement, fury, expectation twisting together. She stared at me, waiting for the familiar apology. The soothing smile, the offer to fund the trip so the mood could return to normal. And that's when I remembered 2 weeks ago. My car spinning twice. Metal shrieking. Guardrail. My hands shaking as I texted the family group chat. Car crash. I need someone to pick up the kids from school. Not one reply. Not one. Chloe finally responded hours later, but with spa selfies. My parents saw the message. The read receipts confirmed it. They simply chose silence. It was Anya, only Anya, who left work, picked up Leo and Maya, and took them for pizza until I was discharged. Now, in this fancy restaurant, with my mother waiting for my obedience, something deep inside me clicked, silent, final, satisfying. I spoke one word. No. People imagine devastation as an explosion, public, sudden, dramatic. But real devastation is slow. It trains you. It shapes you. It teaches you to shrink, to apologize for existing, to make yourself small, inch by inch, until you are a whisper in your own life. I grew up just outside Chicago in a suburb where the neighbors knew the schedule of the garbage trucks and the names of every family's dog. My father was a manager at a logistics company, a man who was good with systems and bad with people, especially the people under his roof. If a system broke, he fixed it. If a child ignored it, that was his method. Ignore, deflect, move on. By high school, I was the responsible one. Not because I was born that way, but because someone had to be. My mother tried to manage life with grand gestures and flimsy budgets, the way people of her generation patched everything, with hope and credit cards. She loved us out loud and bankrupted using private. And those two force cancelled each other out until I felt like zero. On Sundays, she'd talk about the importance of family, of sticking together. Then on Monday, she'd callousing for a few hundred to cover the electric bill. Money I knew was reality for a shopping trip. The manipulation was constant. Humiliation loves a quiet phone call. I learned early that invisibility was safety. If I could not be praised, I could be useful. I got a job at 16 and started paying for my own school supplies, my own clothes, shared on my income while ridiculing my thriftiness. You'd be so much more fun if you weren't always saving, she told once in front of my friends. It pretended not to hear. I always pretended. I went to a state school and worked 2 jobs to graduate with no debt. My mother bragged about my independence to her friends, conveniently leaving out the fact that I was also paying her car insurance. When I got my first corporate job, she saw my salary not as my success, but as her new line of credit. We're a family. She'd say, what's yours is ours, but it was a one-way street. The car accidents would have been the final straw. It was a Tuesday. I texted the family chat from the emergency room. My plea, simple and desperate. The silence that followed was an answer. Chloe's post finally appeared hours later. A boomerang of 2 champagne fruits clinking together. The caption: a breezy treat yourself Tuesday. My prince in action wasn't an oversight. It was a decision. And now sitting at this dinner, listening to my mother talk about non-refundable cruise deposits while my body was still a mess of healing bruises, I didn't just get angry. I went cold. That coldness settled deep in my bones. A permanent chill where warmth used to be. My name is Kendall. I'm 36, a mother of Tulio who is 10, and Maya who is 7. And for my entire adult life, I had been their family's foundation. I thought that's what a foundation was for. I was so wrong. The fallout began less than 24 hours after the dinner. It started with Chloe. She texted me a link to an obscenely expensive handbag. A few minutes later, another text arrived. Mum said you were being weird about that cruise and that Anna was a total witch. Everything okay? The manipulation was so transparent. It was almost insulting. Ignored both messages, letting them sit there unread. My new boundary was silence. Then came my father. It sent a long rambling text about the importance of family helping each other. A lecture that conveniently ignored their complete failure to help me after the accident. He painted me as the villain. The one who was suddenly punishing his sharp-broken mother for a simple request. I read the message and felt nothing but a dull, empty ache. He had always chosen me mother's side. He had always chosen the path of least resistance. Even when that path was paved over my well-being, the performance reached its peak fate meaning. Chloe posted a dramatic black and white quote on her Instagram story. The kind influencers use when they're feuding. It read, "It hurts when you realize you were watering a dead plant all along." The irony was so profound, so utterly lacking in self-awareness that I almost laughed. They saw themselves as the victims, the neglected plants. They had no idea they were threat in the soil. I thought the conflict would stay at the level of petty, emotional, blackmail, guilt trips, and passive-aggressive social media posts. I was wrong. The real escalation came a week later, with a call that changed everything. It was the principal from Leo's school. Her voice was gentle but firm. She informed me that an anonymous call had been made to the child welfare hotline. My heart stopped. Their complaint, she explained, made 2 specific allegations. First, that my children were frequently left unsupervised in an unsafe home environment. Second, and this is what made the blood drain from my face, that I had a substance abuse problem and was misusing the prescription pain medication I'd been given after the accident. It was a cold, sickening rush that I knew with absolute certainty who had made that call. Only my parents and Cloak knew the specific name of my prescription. I had told my mother about it on the phone when she'd called not to ask how I was, that to complain that my accident was stressing times her times out. This was their next move. This waste higher leverage. They weren't just asking for money anymore. They were threatening with the loss of my children to Getty. They had crossed a line from which there was no return. The family I thought I had was gone. In its place stood a group of strangers willing to destroy my life for a cruise. That night, stewing in a potent cocktail of fury and fear, I did something I should have done. Years ago, I launched a full financial audit of my life. The malicious hotline call wasn't just a threat. It was a trigger. It pushed me past grief and straight into a cold, methodical need for facts. I spent hours online pulling credit reports, downloading bank statements, and untangling the web of financial instrumenti had allowed to grow over the years. My hands didn't shake. My mind was clear like a winter sky after a blizzard. I was an analyst at my day job. I was good with details, with patterns, with finding the signal in the noise. For the first time, I turned that skill on my own life. That's when I found it. A credit card opened 6 months prior with a major bank I didn't use. My name was on the account, and listed as an authorized user was my sister, Chloe. The balance was over $12,000. I scrolled through the statement, my breath catching in my chest. The charge painted a vivid picture of the curated life Chloe projected on social media Boutique hotels in the city. Dinners at restaurants I couldn't afford and a steady stream of purchases from designated clothing stores. Every sponsored post, every perfectly staged selfie was funded by my credit. A chilling clarity washed over me. Sharp and absolute. She hadn't just been using my generosity. She had stolen my identity to finance her fantasy life. This was no longer a family dispute about money or fairness. This was identity theft. This was a crime. And they had just handed me all the evidence I would ever need. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. The time for emotional reactions was over. My actions from that point on were deliberate and cold. First, I called a lawyer who specialized in financial fraud. Her name was Miss Albright, and her voice was as calm and solid as granite. She listened to my story without interruption, and when I was done, she said, "Good. You have everything we need." Second, with Ms. Albright's guidance, I filed a detailed police report, citing identity theft. The officer who took my statement that a weary kindness in his eyes. He'd seen it all before. Happens more than you think, he said, shaking his head. Sometimes the people closest to you are really the ones who do the most damage. Third, I froze my credit with all 3 module bureaus. It felt like raising a fortress wall, a tangible barrier against further invasion. Then I sat down at my kitchen table and began to write. I crafted a social media post for me private Facebook page, the one connected to our entire extended family, old neighbors and community friends. I was strategic. I didn't use a single name. I didn't have to. I simply laid out a precise, emotionless timeline of events. I started with the date of the crash and my plea for help. I followed it with the spa day photos, the public demand for cruise money at the birthday dinner, and the subsequent guilt-tripping texts. Then I detailed an anonymous malicious call to my son's school, carefully explaining how the caller used specific medical information only immediate family would know. I finished with the discovery of the fraudulent credit card opened in my name, and then I attached the receipts. I posted screenshots side by side, my desperate text in the group chat next to Chloe's smiling champagne boomerang. A redacted copy of the time-stamped call log from the school principal, and the crown jewel, a redacted copy of the credit card statement showing thousands of dollars in charges for designer goods and luxury travel next to a screenshot of close Instagram feed where she was wearing or seeing those exact items. I hit post. The effect wasn't gradual. It was a bomb detonating in the quiet manicured garden of my family's public image. The post triggered an immediate cascade of revelations. A cousin messaged me, revealing Chloe had borrowed $2,000 from him for a rental deposit and never paid it back. A former family friend commented, questioning a suspicious GoFundMe. My parents had run 2 years ago for emergency plumbing repairs that never seemed to happen. The facade didn't just crack. It disintegrated in real time as a clear and undeniable pattern of deceit was exposed for everyone to see. The consequences were swift. Chloe's micro-influencer brand partners who sold wellness teas and boutique clothing dropped her within 48 hours. My parents quietly deleted their old questionable GoFundMe page. The social shrapnel from the detonation was devastating to their carefully curated image. My mother called me sobbing, not to apologize, but to demand, "I take the post down. You're ruining the family's name," she cried, her voice thick with self-pity. "There's nothing left to ruin," I said, and for the first time, I hung up on her. A few days later, my lawyer sent a formal cease and desist letter to Chloe regarding the identity theft along with a notification that the credit card company and the police were pursuing a fraud investigation. Her social media accounts went dark. The demands formally stopped completely. The silence was beautiful. Within 3 months, their world, which had been propped up by my income and credit for so long, collapsed. Without my financial support, they lost their house to the bank. My mother's brittle pride couldn't survive a foreclosure notice taped to their front door. Chloe, stripped of her influencer income and drowning in debt, had to move back in with them into a cramped rental apartment across town. My world, in contrast, became small and peaceful. It revolved around my children, my work, and my new chosen family, Anya and Ben. We started a tradition of Sunday night dinners, our lot of filling the space where angst used to live. One evening, my daughter Maya looked up from her drawing and said, "I like how our house is calm now." That word calm was the ultimate word. It was worth more than any apology I never received. With the money, I was no longer hemorrhaging. I started college funds for Leo and Maya and opened my first real investment account. My future was finally my own. 6 months later, a letter arrived. Norriton address. Inside, a single sentence was scrawled in my mother's handwriting. "You destroyed this family." I felt no anger, no sadness, no guilt. I walked to the kitchen and shredded it. I didn't destroy a family. I just stopped buying a sole foundation holding up a rotten structure. And when it collapsed under the weight of its own decay, I was finally free. If you've stayed with me to the end of this story, I'd like to ask something simple. Think about the lines you draw with the people you love. Think about whether they respect them, or whether they constantly try to erase them. And if you've ever felt like a walking bank account, know this. You are not defined by the demands of your family. You are defined by the moment you decide your own worth is non-negotiable. The greatest lesson I learned is that the people who belong in your life don't need to be begged to show up. And it's more than okay to show the rest of them the door. If this story touched you, I'd be grateful if you shared it with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe if you'd like more stories like this, because each one is a reminder that dignity can be reclaimed even after decades. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far a story of strength can travel.